zip up your members-only jacket, pour yourself a TaB and vodka, pause your Walkman as we bring you to the 1980s.
That's right. Welcome to the 80s Show podcast, where we talk about all things 1980s. From movies to TV shows, music and stars, fads and fashion, we'll talk about anything and everything to do with the 1980s.
The 1980s, the best decade in decades.
All right, so we are your hosts. My name is Bill Lassiter alongside Damian Raffelli. Welcome to the program. We're so glad that you're here listening. And if you haven't done so already, we would love to hear from you on Twitter or Facebook. You can follow us at Twitter at 80 Show Podcast, or you can also email us at 80showpodcast@gmail.com. We really would love to hear from you. All right, Damian, what do we got on the show today?
Well, first up, it's 1980-something, where I'm going to list a number of events that happened in a specific year in the 80s, and Bill's going to have to guess what year it is.
No problem. I think I got this. I'm going to nail this. We're also going to talk about whatever happened to TaB soda. I mean, we should probably know what happened to TaB soda since we use it in our intro every week. And Damian, how we're going to round out the show?
We're going to talk about the ultimate babysitter for all of us Latchkey kids, Three's Company.
Oh, yes. Come and knock on our door. We've been waiting for you, buddy. All right. So exciting news here also on the podcast, as we have a new sponsor of the 80 Show podcast. And so we would like to introduce you to ColecoVision.
ColecoVision, the best game in town, just got better.
While Atari keeps trying to sell you new systems like the 5200, with ColecoVision you only need one system, because ColecoVision expands to give you a Super Action controller set with Super Action Baseball, a driving module with turbo, an expansion module to play all Atari 2600 games, and only ColecoVision plugs into the Atom module to become the complete Atom computer system. So if you don't want to keep buying new systems, there's only one system to buy, ColecoVision. Sorry, Atari.
All right, everybody, we are going to go and talk about 1980-something. So what's going to happen here is Damian is going to tell me some things that happened in a particular year in the 1980s. I will have to take those clues and run with them and try to guess what year it is. And we'll give you some information about that year. So, Damian, take it away.
The year was 1980-something. And this year, Apple introduced and Steve Jobs introduced the Macintosh computer.
Ooh, okay. All right.
Which had a retail price of $2,500.
Wow. That's a little bit more than a Yugo.
Yeah, for a computer that didn't even have a hard drive.
That's right. Okay. All right. What else happened this year?
Well, one of the top shows of the 80s premiered this year, The Cosby Show.
Ooh, The Cosby Show. Now, I just read something recently, like ABC actually rejected The Cosby Show and let NBC take it over, and that's crazy. Yeah, oops. Yeah, there's a lot of money they lost there. Okay.
Although now they might be happy that's not part of their library.
All right. What else happened in 1980-something?
So the top single that year was by Prince, When Doves Cry, on the Purple Rain album.
Ooh. Okay, so those are my clues, right? So,
those are your clues.
So Macintosh debuts.
One more hint. It was in the 1980s.
Oh, that narrows it down. I remember being in elementary school when Cosby Show premiered. I want to say I was in 5th or 6th grade.
Did you have a sweet Cosby sweater?
I think I did have one, but it was like 88. I've got a good Christmas picture of me in a sweet 80s sweater. I couldn't pull off something like Bill Cosby could back in the day. Cliff Huxtable. All right, so Macintosh. So I don't remember much about Macintosh because we just didn't have the funds to have $2,500 computer.
And that was $2,500 in 1980s dollars.
That's true. Yeah. I have no idea what that would be right now. But so When Doves Cry. So here's the thing. I remember a couple episodes back when we talked about the Super Bowl Shuffle, Chicago Bears, 85 Bears. And I remember that it was up against Prince for a Grammy.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking, so the Super Bowl was 86. It was 85 Bears. So I'm going to say 1985. I feel confident with 1985, thinking that's when Cosby premiered as well. So that's my final answer, 1985.
Well, you're overconfident, but you were wrong. You were close, though.
Dang.
Very close. Off by a year.
Okay, it's got to be 84 then.
Yeah, 84.
84. Okay, all right, good. All right, what else happened in 84, Damian?
So, well, take a guess. What was the number one movie in 1984? Just take a while. There was a lot of good movies that came out in 1984.
So I specifically know of 3 movies that were in 84. I just for whatever reason, I know them. Red Dawn.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
Which should have been the number one movie, but I don't think it did make as much money in the box office as everybody else.
In our hearts, it was number one.
That's right. Cue Wolverine's clip.
Wolverines!
The other movie that I remember being in 1984 specifically was The Karate Kid.
Yes.
Am I right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
The original, the first one.
The original Karate Kid was 84.
Not the one with Will Smith's son.
No, not that one. That's not the original one. But the third thing I remember is the second Indiana Jones movie, Temple of Doom. And it wasn't as great as the first one or the third one. But I would think
it was no Crystal Skulls.
Or the fourth one. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom being the number one movie in 1984.
That's a good guess because a lot of good movies came out that year. Goonies, for example.
Goonies was 84 too. Okay, yeah.
But the number one movie that year starred Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop.
Beverly Hills Cop. Yes, of course.
It's a
so now
classic.
that's crazy because that's an R-rated movie, right? And
yeah.
So
I believe it was, yeah.
So to have I remember reading something about R-rated movies usually don't make as much money because you have a smaller audience coming to see them and stuff. So
and I think Ghostbusters came out in 84 too. It was a big year for movies, so there was a lot of competition.
Yeah, very cool, very cool.
Take a guess at how much a movie ticket cost, just on average, national average in 1984.
Well, shoot. So I worked at a movie theater in high school, and that was the early 90s. And I remember for sure a regular ticket was $5, and the matinee was $2.50. So it's got to be less than $5 because it was like 1990. I'll say $4. $4 a movie ticket.
That's close. And it might have been in California. The national average was about $3.40.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think it's about
$30.40
now.
You can't even get a thing of popcorn for $3.40.
Yeah,
right now. That's not even. You can't even buy that mini size popcorn for $3.40.
Although now you can get the nice loungers and get people to bring food to you in the theater. Though,
That's true.
It's a little
but it
different.
is movie theater food, so there you go.
Okay, just one more thing in 1984. Take a guess at how much a gallon of gas cost in 1984.
Ooh, 84. I would say probably maybe $1, a little bit over $1, like $1.05.
Ooh, that's really close. It was about $1.10 national average.
All right. Yeah. Wow. That's inflation.
Yeah. Things change.
Things change. All right. Well, that was what happened in 1987 or 1980 something, and that was 1984.
Yeah. Thanks for taking a trip with us down to the mid 80s, and we'll be doing this segment again very soon. And I'm sure Bill will study up a little bit more for the next one.
Wow. Thanks, Damian.
TaB Cola for a beautiful drink. TaB Cola for beautiful people. TaB.
All right, next segment on the program today is Whatever Happened To, and today we're going to talk about whatever happened to TaB soda. Now, Damian, he's done some research on this and has found a lot, and I was able to track down, our research team was able to track down a couple of TaBs, and we both each have a TaB soda. We're going to open them, and let's see if you can hear this. And I'm going to drink them. I'm going to drink mine. You can have some of yours too, Damian, while we talk about whatever happened to TaB soda. So let's take a sip. Yep, tastes like... Okay, go ahead. I'm not going to tell you what it tastes like until the end.
It tastes like the 80s.
It sure does.
TaB soda, it was sort of synonymous with the 80s.
Yeah.
It was in movies and TV shows, all the pop culture. I think it might have even been some songs. It was featured in movies like Back to the Future. It was even in some an SNL skit where they mixed vodka and TaB, which that's the one thing you forgot.
You know
in
what?
This bill.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I remember the line in Back to the Future because he goes into the diner and says, I like to have like a Pepsi free. He's like, well, you want a Pepsi, you got to pay for it, pal. Okay, how about a TaB? Well, you got to order something before I give you a TaB. Yeah, so I remember that.
Yeah, so it was everywhere. And they had some classic commercials. stuff like that. So whatever happened to TaB? Well, let's before we talk about what happened to it, where did TaB come from? When did it start? Let's look at the history of TaB. So it was a Coca-Cola brand, or still is a Coca-Cola brand. It was launched in the early 60s by Coca-Cola. They wanted to go after a different market of people who were a little bit more concerned about their weight and didn't want sugar. So they wanted to have something that was low calorie.
Okay.
And so that's when they launched TaB. And when it was first launched, it had, I think it was 2 calories. It was sweetened with saccharin. And the interesting thing on this is, how did the TaB name come about?
Yeah, because I've always wondered that. And what's interesting, even on this can that I have in front of me, it's TaB, capital T, lowercase a, uppercase B.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's an interesting story. So this was in the early 60s. The ad agency that was working with Coca-Cola, they decided to get all high-tech and use an IBM mainframe.
Okay.
These were these big mainframes from IBM that, were huge.
Took up a room.
Yeah,
or
I don't
whatever.
think this was still the time of punch cards. I'm not sure. But what they did is they input some data about, who their target market was and some ideas they had, and they ran just through a list of hundreds of thousands of names, and they wanted it to be short. I think it was originally 4 letters. And it ended up down to be 3, if my math is correct on TaB.
Yeah, let me check the math.
And they came out with TaB. And it was originally not with a capital B. That was changed by one of the creative marketing people.
Okay.
Which just to make it look more cool, which I do like. So it was a computer-generated name in the 60s, which is pretty kind of cool.
Yeah. So it was made with saccharin, is that what you said?
Yeah, it was made with saccharin.
I remember my mom used to have saccharin tablets she used to put in her coffee. They're little tiny sugar cubes.
Yeah.
And they were called saccharin tablets. But
I believe it was the first alternative to sugar.
Yeah.
Sweetener that was used in products. And then, of course, it was linked to cancer in the 80s.
Oh, whoops.
So there's been some debate on whether or not the lab testing on that was done properly. So they had to switch it out from saccharin to NutraSweet. People didn't like the taste. And now it's made, I think, with aspartame. I don't know what the differences are. They're all chemicals.
Isn't like aspartame also cause cancer or something?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a derivative of saccharin. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If basically they're chemicals that'll probably kill you.
Right.
So
what happened? How did it why did it go away? What happened, Damian?
Before we do that, I'm gonna just take another little sip of sweet death right here.
Nice.
Okay. All right.
It's not as sweet as I remembered, but we'll get to the taste test thing at the end.
But people are willing to get some cancer if they, for their TaB. They're if they got to trade one or the other, they're going to take the TaB. So what really happened? Well, do you remember what happened in 1982 besides Rocky III?
E.T.
N.E.T.?
No.
Diet Coke was launched.
Oh, wait. So Diet Coke, owned by Coca-Cola, it's pretty much the same product as TaB.
Yeah, it's targeting the same target market for people who want to, quote unquote, keep tabs on their health or on their weight. I'm sorry, on their weight.
The weight. That's good.
And I guess Coca-Cola decided, Coke was a bigger name brand going back to the 1800s than TaB, and they wanted to focus all their marketing on Diet Coke. People liked it, even though there was still a lot of people who loved TaB. A lot of people switched over to Diet Coke.
Okay, well, I guess it makes sense if it's more readily available too.
Yeah, and they had a couple different flavors. They even had a couple different versions. One was caffeine-free. Another was a clear version.
Crystal TaB.
Yeah.
Like Crystal Pepsi in the early 90s, yeah.
Good pull.
Was it really called Crystal TaB?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was TaB Clear.
TaB
It was TaB
Clear. Okay.
And there was Crystal Pepsi as well. So, where has it gone? What's happened? Well, they're still manufacturing it just in small quantities.
Okay.
There are people that they even call themselves Tabaholics or TaB addicts. There's some websites out there just dedicated to TaB fans.
There's a Coke store in Las Vegas, and I was there recently, and I don't remember seeing TaB there, but they had all sorts of weird flavors and stuff like that. But Damian and I actually went to the Coca-Cola factory in Atlanta, Georgia several years ago. We should have got our TaB swag there.
Yeah, I know. We tried about 300 different flavors of Coke.
That's right.
And that's also where I was high-fiving the white polar bear.
That's right,
the
Coca-Cola polar bear, because nothing sells soft drinks like a scary wild animal.
Well, there's been such a shortage of TaB, it's actually been inducing a panic for TaB fans.
Ooh.
The New York Times this fall wrote an article titled, "Where Has All the TaB Gone? A Shortage Panics Fans."
All right, if you're panicking over the absence of a diet soda, I think you've got your priorities mixed up in life.
First world problems.
I guess so.
All right. Well, if you have strong feelings about TaB, Diet Coke, Pepsi Free, Crystal Pepsi, the new Coke, etc.
We should do a whole episode on 80s soft drinks because we could talk about the new formula Coke and Coke Classic, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that totally wouldn't bore anybody doing a whole episode on soda.
I'm sure someone else has already done that.
Might make them thirsty.
So, yeah, if you have any TaB stories that you want to tell. I mean, I remember as a kid, my mom buying the 12 packs of TaB and having it at home. And I do remember shortly thereafter her switching over to Diet Coke. So,
how else could you do aerobics in your leg warmers without a TaB?
I mean, I have no idea. So, yeah, let us know on social media at 80 Show Podcast on Twitter, 80 Show Podcast on Facebook or Instagram. Let us know if you have any TaB stories or if you would like to also engage in our taste test. Oh, speaking of taste test, Damian, what do you think of your TaB soda there?
Delicious. Refreshing.
It tastes a little bit like Diet Coke. I think they're the same product, and they just ran out of the cans for TaB or something. I'm not sure.
I can hear people screaming right now at how dare you? How dare you, sir?
All right. Well, we hope to hear from you about TaB soda. Thanks.
All right, for all you Latchkey kids out there, it's time to talk about the ultimate babysitter, Three's Company.
That's right. So we decided that we do a segment about Three's Company and the ultimate babysitter. So Damian and I were both latchkey kids in the 1980s, which meant that we'd go to school, come home, nobody's home, we take care of ourselves. And for me, I remember coming home, I'd either ride my bike or take the bus and call my mom at work and then basically just sit around and do nothing. Sometimes I'd go out to the park. I'd probably go out to the park until dark with some of my friends, play at the park, and then come home, and there's no babysitter. There's no adult there. So who watched me?
TV.
The TV. That's right. And, of course, in the early 80s, well, actually throughout the 80s, the rerun that was constantly on was Three's Company. I don't know how many times a night Three's Company was on. It was like Three's Company was on like twice, and then maybe Love Connection was on in there. I don't know what else, but Three's Company was the ultimate babysitter. And I learned a lot about life from Jack Chipper and the girls.
And if you had a good rabbit antenna or a good enough coat hanger to stick into your TV or maybe some good aluminum foil, you could easily pick up 3 reruns a day.
That's right. That's probably true, actually. That's probably true. So, Dame, give us a little bit of background information about the show.
Well, the show straddled the 70s into the 80s. It was based in Santa Monica, California.
That's right.
And it starred, of course, John Ritter, as well as Suzanne Summers and whoever played Janet.
Oh, wow. I think her name was Joyce DeWitt. But go ahead.
There you go. And, so it was the classic classic TV show of everything's a sexual innuendo. And that's pretty much the plot of it.
Yeah, it's pretty much double entendre on top of double entendre, the entire series of that show.
The other night, Kara and I rewatched a few of the Three's Company's episodes. We watched the pilot, and it was for a pilot, it was really funny. I mean, for usually pilots aren't as good; they don't quite hit their stride. They'll recast, do different things. They really hit their stride well in that, and I thought that was funny. And we watched a couple other episodes from different seasons. The one thing that I realized is, I guess because I'm an adult now, is everything was about sex. Okay. Not just some of the jokes. Every single joke was about sex somehow.
Well, I remember, if I remember right, the Ropers who lived downstairs, the landlords, she was always talking about how Miss Roper, they never had sex. I just remember that was a common theme every episode was that. And I believe that the reason why Jack was able to live there with 2 females was because they told the landlords that he was gay. Is that right?
It starts off with Jack needing a place to live in the pilot. he ends up needing to get a change of clothes when he ends up in their apartment after a party one night. They find him and he needs to change his clothes. So they give him their bathrobe, which is a female girl's bathrobe. Mrs. Roper comes up. She thinks that she's pretty sure that Jack's a man. She's not sure. The girls say it's one of their girlfriends. So then, of course, Mr. Roper comes up, and of course, there's a woman up there he thinks is Jack, but it's a real woman, and he sexually molests her by touching her breasts on the show.
All right.
It's actually touches her boobs, and then realizes that it's a woman, and the hijinks ensue. Of course, though, apparently in the 70s, even in hypothetical Santa Monica, California in the 70s, you were not allowed to live with a member of the opposite sex, even if it's purely platonic. So the landlords had to give their okay for him to be a roommate, which is insane to me.
It's so bizarre thinking about that now. But yeah, one of the things that I really liked about this show was, John Ritter was such a good comedic actor. He was he had a lot of physical comedy, which you don't. I was thinking about this today. I was like, what other sitcoms today have physical comedy? Like Jack Tripper was always like diving into a bush or falling over a couch or something like that, and you just don't see that today. He put his whole body into it, and that's, I think that's one of the things that I remember as a kid watching it that used to crack me up, is all the hijinks that Jack would get into and having to hide. It was always like him hiding from somebody about something, or some misunderstanding amongst the roommates. But I just remember that physical comedy that John Ritter brought to the show.
Yeah, he was an amazing comedian. His timing was great. And like you said, the physical comedy is the best. It's a little bit of that slapstick comedy. And while we were watching it, my wife, Kara, mentioned, she's like, I think Jim Carrey was inspired by John Ritter because she saw little John Ritter qualities within, Jim Carrey's acting. I could totally see that physical comedy.
Yeah,
I wonder
for sure.
if he maybe watched a lot of Three's Company growing up as well.
He was probably a Latchkey kid too.
I'm sure he was. Another thing I noticed, I don't know if you've seen John Ritter's son. He's in a bunch of TV shows and things.
Yeah.
His son sounds exactly like him. Looks a lot like him too, but their voices sound exactly the same.
Yeah, I've noticed that for sure. But I also liked, you had the Ropers at first come in, and then they move on. They start their own TV show, the Ropers, called the Ropers, and then you bring in Don Knotts, who also a very funny physical comedian back in the day, as Ralph Furley. And I mean, we could even have a whole episode on who is better, Mr. Roper or Mr. Furley. I mean, that'd just be awesome. I just remember his outrageous outfits that Don Knotts would wear in that show. It's just some sweet. I just remember some sweet polyester baby blue pants and sport jackets and stuff like that.
And the huge collars he'd wear.
The huge collars he'd wear and stuff like that. Yeah.
I used to love the reruns of the Andy Griffith Show too, when Don Knotts played
Barney
Fife. So one of the other things that struck me watching this is that I realized why we as a generation are so screwed up. This is the kind of show that influenced us and mentored us growing up, and it really was apparent to us growing up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was funny because I did some research and found went on to the website. There's an organization called Common Sense Media, and they kind of rate shows and movies for parents to read. Of course, our parents didn't give a crap what we were watching. I don't think they're just happy that the TV was watching us at the time. But and they rate movies how appropriate they are for kids. And I was really surprised that they actually said, Common Sense Media actually said that 10 years old and up, it's appropriate for them. And man, I would probably think 14 and up, but they said 10 and up. So
I still don't understand some of the jokes.
Yeah, neither do I. But even with all that, I mean, it was the ultimate babysitter because it kept us entertained while we were home, waiting for our parents to get home from work or whatever. And if there was no Three's Company or some of the other reruns that are going on, who knows? We would have been run the streets, Damian.
Yeah, kept me out the streets.
That's right. So did the coldness where you were growing up.
That too.
Yeah. So we'd like to hear from you as well. If you have a Three's Company story, we'd like to hear from you on Facebook or Twitter. Also, if you can think of a rerun or a TV show that was the ultimate babysitter for you, we'd also like to hear from you. So you can hit us up on Twitter at 80 Show Podcast, or on Facebook. You can use the hashtag #TheUltimateBabysitter. And like I said, we would love to hear from you.
We're ColecoVision, and we bring the
That's the, Bill, I swear I unplugged the fax machine. I promise you, but somehow maybe the intern plugged it in again. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's
It's good news, right? ColecoVision is going to double their contribution to the podcast.
Well, it's from Coleco.
Okay.
That's the only good news.
Okay. All right. And
they were bankrupt in 1988 apparently.
wow, and they can still send a fax to 2018. That's not 2019. That's pretty good.
Whoever's doing their ad buying may not have gotten the notice that they're out of business. It's not our fault. It's not our fault.
All right. Well, there we go. We lost another sponsor. So, hey, once again, if you would love to sponsor an up-and-coming podcast, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at 80showpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to take your money.
And we accept swag, anything in place of money if you don't have any.
That's right. That's true. Swag would be awesome.
Please join us for the next 80 Show podcast episode, where we'll be giving our recommendations for the best movies and TV shows streaming on VHS. After that, it's an 80s character battle. Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties versus Mike Seaver from Growing Pains. Then I'm going to try and stump Bill with 80s TV theme song trivia.
And yeah, looking forward to that episode. Hopefully you are too. All right, so for the 80 Show podcast, I'm Bill Lassiter. Come and knock on our door.
And I'm Damian Raffelli. Not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends about it. They can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Theme song composed by my good friend, fellow rock star, straight out of Bakersfield. You may also know him from the band Videodrone, Mark Russell Davis.